Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are tackling something. Well, it's a stack of sources that make an absolutely extraordinary claim. A claim that, if true, might just rewrite the entire foundation of British and Irish history.
It's a big one. And our focus today is on a single, unique, and frankly, very strange place, the City of London.
The Square Mile.
Exactly. The ultimate historical anomaly. For centuries, it's just been seen as this resilient quirk of history. It has its own laws, its own ancient common council,
A separate police force, which is always wild to me.
a completely separate police force, and of course the big one. It was the only major settlement in the region that William the Conqueror just couldn't subdue in 1066. He had to go around it.
And that independence is really the key here, isn't it? It implies there's this unbroken chain of governance, a structure that somehow survived all these waves of invasion.
It does. And our sources today suggest that the reason for that resilience is that the city's origins, its foundational symbols, even its name, they're all rooted in a history that is far, far deeper and very different than what we're taught in schools.
Okay, so let's lay out the theory. This isn't about Romans or Saxons.
Not at all. We're looking at a theory that proposes the core identity of the City of London comes from a substrate language and culture, a mix of Wolof and ancient Gaelic brought directly from West Africa.
By the earliest human arrivals, thousands and thousands of years ago.
Precisely.
So our mission for this deep dive is really one of historical linguistics, of cultural geography. The author of this theory is essentially saying, I have the key, and this substrate language unlocks the whole mystery.
Yes, and we have to ask, is the evidence strong enough? Does decoding the city's name, its ceremonial figures, the Thames River, does it convincingly solve this mystery?
It forces you to just, completely reconsider the timeline of human settlement on the Isles.
It really does. The sources argue that the first black Homo sapiens arrived directly to the Shannon Estuary in Ireland
By boat, not over a land bridge.
by ocean-going vessel, long before the continental migrations we all learn about. And they argue this established a unique indigenous template that, and this is the core of it, is still active today.
The implication of that is just. It's enormous. It means the foundation of the global financial capital has linguistic ties, cultural ties, that you can trace directly to the African jungles.
It's a radical challenge to the existing narratives of identity in the UK and Ireland.
This isn't just dry history, then. It feels like it's about reclaiming a lost foundation.
That's how the sources frame it. It's about repairing what they call a damaged historical algorithm, showing that the foundational logic of the Isles is thousands of years older and profoundly different than we've been led to believe.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's get right into the core argument, the arrival itself and the linguistic blueprint they brought with them.
So the whole theory rests on this idea of a direct maritime arrival. The sources say Homo sapiens migrated by boat straight from West Africa, specifically the Senegal estuary.
And they put a date on this?
It's a very broad range. They suggest it could be anywhere from 10,000 to maybe even 50,000 years ago.
So why the sea route? Why not over land?
It's a question of efficiency and safety. Land travel was, well, incredibly slow and filled with dangers, geography, hostile populations, you name it. The sea was seen as a more direct path.
And they had the technology for that kind of journey.
They did. The key piece of tech was something called the Gaul boat.
The Gaul boat.
Yeah, and the name Gaul in Wolof literally translates to something like a large boat to carry people, or a large folk bed that floats.
So we're talking about sophisticated early oceanic travel.
Absolutely. They would have used the prevailing currents of the North Atlantic, making landfall on the southwest coast of Ireland, right around the Shannon Estuary. This direct arrival, millennia before anyone else, is their explanation for the unique linguistic markers you find in the region.
And they brought with them more than just technology. They brought the very foundation of language itself.
Yes, the sources trace it all back to a single primal utterance.
The theoretical first word.
The first word, which they say was a sound like ah. Yeah, just a raw, undifferentiated sound. It was the only expression for the most intense human emotions. Sudden pain, overwhelming joy, pure rage. The context told you which one it was.
That makes a lot of sense. A single high-stakes sound for an immediate reaction. But how does that evolve into, a language?
A key differentiation was needed, and the catalyst for that, the sources claim, was seeing a specific, powerful natural event. A burning bush.
A burning bush.
A burning bush. When they encountered this thing, a source of wonder, maybe danger, definitely mystery, that utterance mutated. It became Allah, to signify this specific, powerful experience that could trigger pain or joy or anger.
And this is where the sources draw this huge line in the sand, a massive divergence across the entire globe.
Exactly. It's a fork in the road of human consciousness. For the people who later migrated east, that sound, Allah, became forever associated with the source of that power, with the divine, with God.
So that's the linguistic track that gives us words like Allah or Alleluia.
Precisely. The source is even connected to Moses and the Ten Commandments, received from a voice behind a burning bush. For that group, the focus became the spiritual authority embodied by that event.
But the people who traveled west, the ones who arrived on the Isles, they took that word in a completely different direction.
A completely different direction. Their indigenous template, their mindset prioritized immediate, tangible experience. So they took Allah and used it in music and dance. They associated with community, with joy, and with marking specific, powerful places in their landscape.
And we see that in place names today.
We do. A great example is the Irish place name Alhais.
Which you said earlier has a very specific translation in this Wolof Gaelic substrate.
It does. It translates as bush behind which is the brown eye.
The brown.
And that wasn't an abstract idea. That brown eye was the literal visible sign of copper and uranium deposits in the rock. The settlers later mined it.
Wow. So the primal word alala, it gets immediately grounded in the physical reality of finding resources, of mapping your environment. It's not abstract theology.
Not at all. It's practical. One path leads to global religion, the other leads to a copper mine in County Kerry. It's a stunning contrast.
And this practical, resilient logic, this is what the sources call the unchanged jungle mindset.
That's the term for the foundational cognitive structure. The sources describe it as being radical, confrontational, decisive, non-submissive, and just, fundamentally determined to get things done, quickly.
An assertive, non-procrastinating ethos.
Exactly.
Are there signs of this mindset still embedded in our language today?
The sources point to a fascinating and very common detail, the capitalized I in the English language.
The first person singular.
Yes. According to this theory, the capital I isn't just a grammatical quirk. It's a direct linguistic fossil of what we call Flanner self-importance, that innate sense of individualism and non-submission that the islanders carried.
And they claim other languages don't have this.
They claim no continental European language gives that same level of grammatical importance to its first-person singular pronoun. It's a marker of a unique psychological architecture.
And this assertive mindset is then contrasted really vividly with continental thought.
It is. They take Shakespeare's famous "to be or not to be" soliloquy as a prime example.
Okay.
They argue that speech, which was borrowed heavily from French philosophical traditions, embodies everything the Islander template is not. It's endless questioning, it's procrastination, their term is convulsionary immobilism.
Convulsionary immobilism. I like that. So it's agonizing over a decision until you're paralyzed.
And then ultimately submitting. The Islander template is the opposite of that.
So if the original Islander template had written that soliloquy, what would it have sounded like?
It would have sounded like the modern Hiberno-English equivalent, feck it. Or maybe to do the deed.
Right.
The logic is simple. You identify the problem, you skip the endless questioning, and you execute the solution. Now, it's the practical, impulsive logic of the original black jungle hunter settlers.
Now I have to ask, how do the sources justify this kind of leap? It's one thing to talk about ancient etymology, but to say it drives modern political events.
They make a very strong case that this deep cognitive split is the only thing that really explains major political fractures. They explicitly link this defiant, decisive mindset to what they call the unexplained chasm that led to Brexit.
You mean the UK leaving the European Union?
Yes. They argue Brexit wasn't just about trade policy or regulations. It was a deep, almost subconscious eruption of this ancient cultural divergence.
The Islander ethos pushing back?
The decisive Islander ethos,
Oh.
demanding immediate action and sovereignty, clashing with what it saw as continental bureaucracy and institutional dithering. It was the indigenous template reasserting itself.
That reframes Brexit completely. It turns it from a modern political event into a symptom of, 50,000-year-old cultural DNA?
That is the claim.
Which brings us right back to our central question. Does this primal linguistic and cultural template hold the key to finally decoding the City of London?
According to the sources, it absolutely does. We can now apply this foundational logic to the single most resilient institution on the Isles. the city's continued political anomaly, its self-governance, its own laws.
It's secrecy.
Its secrecy, yes. All of it suggests the survival of an unbroken ancient ethos from the time of the very first settlers.
It's like a cultural time capsule. The square mile is the original, oldest part of the city where that spiritual and political structure is most intact.
Which means the core symbols of the city should also reflect this original indigenous template.
And they argue they do.
Perfectly. Yeah. We can start with the most visible and probably most mysterious symbols of the city. The two giant figures, the guardians, Gog and Magog.
Right, the ones in the Lord Mayor's parade. Officially, their origins are just sort of vaguely pagan.
Very vague. But the Wolof substrate, the sources claim, reveals their intended primitive meaning. And you have to remember, this is a primal culture. Its spiritual language is intensely descriptive and, well, visceral.
Okay, so let's take the first one, Gog.
The name is decoded using the Wolof term Goog. It means the ability to develop earlier than usual age, flowering sooner. It's a symbol of immense strength of character, of rapid physical maturity.
A symbol of robust early development. Makes sense. What about Magog?
Well, Mava in Wolof has a very direct, very primitive meaning. Touching, copulating.
Oh.
So Magog is a symbol of virility, of sexual prowess, of an intense physical strength of character.
So if you put those together, the guardians of the city, Gog and Magog, they represent expected primitive expressions. Strength, maturity, virility, sensuality.
It's a jungle culture ethos, right at the spiritual and ceremonial heart of the city of London. It existed long before any Roman or Christian ideas were layered on top.
That wasn't suppressed.
No, it was integral to the original foundation, to its governance, which is why, the sources argue, these figures survive to this day. It's an openly primal, spiritual, and social identity.
The ceremonial figures are compelling, but the biggest hurdle has to be the name of the city itself, London. So many theories over the centuries.
And the sources claim this solution just dispels all of them. The key insight is that the name isn't abstract. It's not named after a mythical king. It is purely geographical and navigational.
A map.
It's an ancient naval chart for sea arrival boats. To get it, you really need to look at a map of the river.
So let's break it down. What are the two core Wolof terms that make up the name London?
The sources identify them as Lonka and Danja.
Lonka?
Lonka in Wolof means hook, and Danja means cube.
Hook and cube. That is very specific. Where on the River Thames do we find a hook and a cube?
You have to put yourself on one of those ancient boats coming upriver from the sea. The Thames, as it approaches the square mile, it doesn't run straight. It makes a very sharp, very distinctive bend. The hook around what we now call the Isle of Dogs.
Okay, I can picture that.
And then right after that hook, the river makes another geometric, almost rectangular turn around the city proper, the cube, before it continues west.
Ah, I see it now. So the name London is literally an instruction.
It's an instruction. Navigate past the hook, then navigate past the cube, and you've arrived. The settlement is right there. The suffixes, the ka and the ja, just emphasize that the location is remote from the sea.
It's definitive proof of a maritime settlement, not an overland one.
Absolutely. And that location was chosen for one primary reason.
Yep.
Security.
The decisiveness of that indigenous template again.
It's all about defense.
Yeah.
That natural formation, the hook and the cube, it created a massive tactical advantage. Any enemy boat trying to attack would have to slow right down to navigate those bends.
And he'd be in plain sight the whole time.
For a sustained period. It gave the settlers plenty of time to see them coming, prepare their defenses, and launch a counterattack. The name London is a primal defense strategy embedded in the etymology of the world's financial capital.
That changes everything. It's not a place name, it's a military doctrine. So the river itself, the Thames, does its name fit this pattern?
Perfectly. The sources argue the name Thames is also rooted in Wolof. The root word is tame.
Tame.
Which means sieve.
A sieve.
A sieve. It's a description of the river's primary function, to drain the land, to act as a giant sieve for the whole island, carrying silt and minerals down to the sea.
That makes sense. It's a very muddy river.
Exactly. The sources also claim the modern spelling is a corruption, that the sound was supposedly added later by Irish monks.
And the es on the end, the Thames.
The final es is a remnant of the word sin, a Wolof word meaning hour.
So the full original name was Thamesin.
Arsiv.
Arsiv. That's a profound declaration of ownership, a real sense of belonging to that river, to that place.
It is. So, based on all this, the perfect navigational explanation for London, the primal meaning of Gog and Magog, the geological description of the Thames, The author confidently states that they have solved the origin of the city of London.
And tied it unequivocally to the language of the earliest black Homo sapiens who settled the Isles.
It's a cohesive argument, and it takes us from the city of London out to the broader landscape, showing that this linguistic template is etched all over the topography of Britain and Ireland.
Okay, let's follow that language map. Let's see how this pattern holds up, starting where the gull boats first landed, the Shannon Estuary in southwest Ireland.
Right, the sources use ancient maps as proof here. On Ptolemy's map from the 2nd century AD, the Shannon Estuary is marked as Sinos,
Sindos.
which through the substrate language is decoded as Sin Rus. We just learned Sin, or Sin means our, and Rus means water or river.
Our river.
Our river. And what's fascinating is that Shannon is one of the few big rivers in the Isles that flows east-west, just like their original home river, the Senegal. They saw a reflection of their home and named it accordingly.
And what about the actual settlements in that area?
The region around Limerick, marked on the map as Gangani, is interpreted from the term Gandax Ganner. This refers to a safe, sheltered place for boats, specifically for their local transport boats.
And this is where the name of the local fishing boat comes from.
That's the claim. The traditional boat still used there today is called the Gandalo. The name is alleged to be a direct descendant of that ancient term for a safe harbor for their boats. The language was always practical.
The sources then show how this indigenous template uses the human body as a metaphor for the landscape. This is where that primal sensuality becomes literally embedded in the geology.
It's a primal worldview. It's not abstract at all. Take Dublin, the capital, the river that runs through it, the Liffey. Its name is interpreted from the Wolof word lef,
And lef means
vagina, indicating a large, receptive harbor. The same root is apparently used for the River Lee in Cork. It's a naming convention that associates these large, fertile, natural harbors with female anatomy.
that is incredibly direct. It points to a culture where sexuality and the physical world were completely intertwined with their spiritual and geographical understanding. What are some other examples?
Well, in the Kerry Mountains, you have Loophead, a big peninsula. That's decoded as Lupa, which is Wolof for five a leg. It's literally the feature that sticks out into the Atlantic like a leg.
And then there's the highest mountain range in Ireland, the McGillicuddy's Reeks. This one is pretty shocking.
The decoding is Magai Kadikakadi. Now, we already know Ma means touching or copulating. The whole phrase translates to something like intensive copulating, rolling along the ground.
Or, as the sources put it more colloquially,
Many bums. It's a description of a landscape so intensely undulating, so dynamic, that the only metaphor they had for it was one of intense sexual activity.
and even the highest peak in that range, Carantohill, it fits into this primal description.
It does. Carantohill is interpreted as Cantug, meaning stuck, sitting in one place. It's the one peak that sits still and immovable in the middle of this sexually charged, dynamic landscape.
It's clear that these settlers weren't seeing an inert landscape. They saw a living, breathing, physically active world.
Absolutely. And this primal logic doesn't just apply to mountains. It shapes political and institutional structures, revealing a kind of ancient code that's still running in modern bureaucracy.
This is where it gets really interesting, looking at the modern Irish state after 1922.
Yes, because the new state chose very specific Gaelic titles for its leaders. And when you decode those titles, you find their original aggressive, primal functions within the tribe.
Let's start with the president, the Uachtaran.
Okay, so the term Uachtaran is derived from the full Wolof sentence, U Akatari,
And the translation.
the person whose job it is to call the tribe to combat. It's a direct reference to that ancient war cry, Achtanaka. So the highest office in the land is fundamentally defined by the primal need to lead the tribe into battle,
The head of state is the chief war caller.
the ultimate embodiment of that decisive indigenous template. The sources even note that when Queen Elizabeth II visited Dublin in 2011, she uttered the word Uachtaran very, very slowly, as if perhaps she was aware of its deep confrontational power.
And the chancellor, the Tánaiste, has a similar embedded meaning.
It does. Tánaiste is decoded as Tan Asman Eagle plus Sky, powerful symbols of authority, of executive function. And the Irish House of Commons, the Dáil, comes from Dajalu, simply a place to meet or gather together.
So our modern governmental structures, through this lens, are just formalized versions of an ancient tribal hierarchy.
The ancient black Homo sapiens hierarchy, yes.
Let's look at a cultural artifact. The sources use the Sealy Gig effigy, that carving of a woman exposing her vulva, to show how central this primal spirituality was.
The Silene gig, which you find on old churches and castles, is rooted in Silene gi, wolof for crevice or vagina. It represents a spiritual practice tied to female sexual power, to fertility, and the sources say it was overseen by a specific social hierarchy.
A power structure built around female sexuality.
Exactly. This power was managed by a caste of high priests and priestesses, and their titles have survived as modern family names. The high priests were called Shi, or Sukaruk, which is the origin of common Irish names, like Sugru. The whole system was about regulating and harnessing this primal physical power.
And this primal language even trickles down into what we just call slang today.
Yes, phrases we think of as uniquely Irish are traced directly to this substrate. The word feck, as in feckit, comes from the Wolof word feck, which just means to make a hole. It's an action, a decisive verb.
Pretty reinforces the mindset.
It does. And banjax, which means broken or ruined, comes from ban and jaxel, meaning to refuse or doubt. These aren't just random slang words, they are echoes, remnants of an ancient cultural lexicon.
The coherence of this entire linguistic map is, well, it's pretty persuasive. It ties everything back to this single source. But now we have to turn to why the sources claim this history has been so thoroughly suppressed.
And this is where the sources launch a really forceful critique, aimed squarely at the official historical narrative. They target the post-1922 Irish state and, most pointedly, Trinity College, Dublin.
TCD, which holds the Royal Charter as the official custodian of the Gaelic language.
Right. And they're accused of, frankly, intellectual negligence and a complete dereliction of duty.
What's the specific charge?
The charge is that TCD has either ignored or actively refused to research the Gaelic language prior to 800 BC. And by doing that, they've allowed later myths and folklore, especially myths that emphasize a white-only dimension, to fill that historical vacuum.
They've effectively erased the memory of the earliest Black culture.
That's the accusation. The sources call it a malicious official conspiracy of obfuscation. They describe the academics involved as educational eunuchs who failed in their mandate to preserve the full history of the language.
And they argue this has real-world consequences.
It's seen as a primary generator of modern racial ignorance. It removes the foundational Black contribution to the history of the Isles, which implicitly validates later, more restrictive racial narratives.
The critique then moves from cultural erasure to something very tangible: modern legal and financial disasters. They use the terms tax and cane to make their point.
This is a perfect example of the functional breakdown they're talking about. Both tax and cane appear in Irish law, but the state treats them as synonyms. It fails to recognize they come from two fundamentally different fiscal concepts in the substrate language.
So what are the original Wolof meanings here?
Taxhiel Wolof means to stick, as in to stick something with a spear. In a primal context, it meant spearing an animal, obtaining a dead animal, a finalized, irreversible transaction.
Okay, and cane?
Can means to be stuck, as in setting a trap to get an animal alive.
Dead animal versus live animal. The difference in finality is huge.
It's the difference between a done deal and an ongoing process. The original concept of cane, the live animal, gave the taxpayer a humane option. The resource was trapped, but it wasn't dead yet. There was still space for an appeal, for negotiation, the equivalent of an independent appeal commissioner who could step in.
And the sources argue that the state ignoring this distinction, treating cane just like tax, is a breach of duty.
A breach of fiduciary duty, and they link this specific linguistic failure to a catastrophic event.
The 2008 bank crisis.
Directly. They argue that this failure to uphold the humane, primal concept of cane contributed to the legislative failures that enabled the unregulated sale of mortgages to vulture funds.
How so?
If the law had respected the indigenous template, respected the live animal concept, meaning the transaction was never fully irreversible, then the mass, unchecked sale of those debts could have been legally challenged. It could have been stopped.
So losing the precision of the ancient language led directly to financial ruin because the legal framework was missing a key humane concept.
That is the core conclusion. When the language is respected, it upholds social equity. When it's ignored, you get legislative failure and economic chaos.
So finally, let's bring this right up to the present day. How is this ancient, decisive mindset seen to be influencing global politics right now?
Well, we go back to that contrast between the decisive islander template and the continental approach. The sources point to the UK's COVID-19 vaccine rollout as a clear, modern example of that primal decisiveness in action.
The speed of it. the determination to get it done quickly.
Exactly. The islander mindset is to get to the bottom of the problem and just deal with it
Hmm.
immediately. And this was contrasted with what was perceived as the bureaucratic sclerosis and logistical delays happening elsewhere in Europe.
The indigenous template in political action.
Yes. And this brings us to what is maybe the most controversial modern example in the sources, the political style of Donald Trump.
Okay, how do they connect him to this?
They draw a direct line. They highlight the heritage of his mother, Mary Ann MacLeod. She was born into a poor, Gaelic-speaking family on the Isle of Lewis in Scotland.
And Gaelic, in this framework, is the language of the boat people, carrying that original, non-procrastinating ethos.
That's the argument. That her maternal cognitive and linguistic background, her fluency in the language that carried this decisive, non-submissive confrontational template, instilled that exact political style in her son.
So Trumpism is seen not as some modern anomaly.
But as an authentic expression of this ancient islander algorithm. A style that prizes immediate, decisive, often unconventional action over protocol and bureaucracy.
And the sources suggest that if we'd properly acknowledged this history, his style wouldn't have been so shocking.
It would have been instantly recognizable. Instead of generating chaos and endless complex political theories, we would have understood it as just. The original indigenous philosophy of the Isles at play. A non-conventional style that reflects the mindset of the ancient islanders, passed down through the generations.
This has been an absolutely extraordinary journey, from the Senegal estuary and the first word, a, through the names of mountains and rivers in Ireland, right into the heart of the City of London and modern global politics.
To synthesize it for you, the listener, the author of these sources is claiming, quite definitively, to have solved the original meaning of the City of London. They've traced its name, its symbols like Gog and Magog, and the name of the Thames River directly back to precise Wolof Gaelic substrate words.
The indigenous template of the earliest black settlers, London as a navigational map, the Lanka Hook and Donja cube, the city's guardians as primal, sensual symbols of a jungle culture that survived because it was never conquered.
And the wider purpose of all this research, according to the sources, is to repair that damaged historical logic, to unearth this ancient black foundation, and in doing so, provide black people in the Isles and in North America with a lost, ancient sense of belonging and culture.
It's an attempt to create a shared foundational story.
It is. And it all comes back to that very first word, that primal sound of pain, anger, and joy that split and created two massive cultural paths for humanity.
One sound, two destinies.
That's right. The same sound diverged. It became Allah in the East, tied to the divine, the Spirit of God. And it became Alleluia in the West, used in music and dance to celebrate joy in the physical world.
So if the core of the Isle's identity, that decisive primal template, that language embedded in the landscape, is rooted in an expression that's shared by foundational religious traditions across the entire globe.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this linguistic link, if it were fully acknowledged and integrated into official history, it raises a very important, maybe even a spiritual question. Does the first word of human experience on the Isles fundamentally change our understanding of what constitutes sacred history on this planet? It implies the spiritual quest began not just in the Middle East, but on a divergent path taken directly from Africa, landing first on the Atlantic coast of Ireland. That linguistic reality is certainly something for you to mull over.